All right, I'm gonna answer your questions about language learning. If your question is not included here, or you've got more questions, simply drop them in the comments and I'll answer them in the next video. All right. I'll put my face here in the corner so it doesn't cover the questions. And here we go. Mari Plots says, I'm a native English speaker trying to become fluent in Italian. I'm very interested to use your method of the years of lessons, university courses, etc. Long heartbreaking journey. I'm buoyed by your conviction. Suggest I have tried using ChatGPT to generate sentences in Italian about subjects interesting to me and useful in daily life. Yeah, you should do that. I then tried loading the PDF into 11 Reader to develop an audio file in natural Italian voice. A couple issues I have encountered and wonder if you have suggestions about. Yeah, 11 Labs sometimes has some problems, and I wish I could help you with that, but I'm trying to fix them myself as well. It does some weird things. Sometimes it makes weird noises. Sometimes the okay, I'll finish the question first. The 11 reader has notable errors in pronunciation when trying to get accuracy. It's really good sometimes in some languages and with some of the voices, right? But other times it just makes really bad errors. Not as of tomorrow. I mean, I don't know all the voices there, but um, it just makes weird sounds, or the volume just randomly goes down during the audio file. So then you're listening to it, you're like out and about, and you're listening to it, and it's talking like that, and it's and then it just like suddenly goes quieter and quieter, and you don't hear anything. So you have to raise the volume, but then when it like the track ends and starts again, it's really loud. So you have to, yeah, it does things like that. I'm sure someone more knowledgeable technically knows how to fix those, but for now, pause is embedded to be able to repeat the phrases. My advice is to use TTS Maker instead. The sound is not as good, like the voices are not as natural sounding, but it's way easier to use, much more intuitive. Just paste it, uh, just press whatever, record or whatever it says there, and you get the audio files, and it works, and it's good enough, and it's easy to use. So yeah, if you're not tech savvy, okay, and maybe if you watch a couple of tutorials, which I should have done, maybe 11 Labs is not that difficult to use either. But from what I've experienced so far, and from what people are telling me, yeah, TTS Maker is just a much easier to use, and yeah, just yeah, use TTS Maker. That's my advice. It's probably also cheaper, I think. Okay, I hope that was useful. Batata Banana Lol says, "Hello, I discovered your channel recently. I love your method. It's a total game changer. Thank you. One question: how would you learn an alphabet that is completely different from the ones you already know? Thanks a lot for sharing so much." Short answer is I wouldn't. Long answer is if I had to, I would do the scriptorium technique a lot. Now, if it's a language, define completely different. If it's something like the Greek alphabet or Cyrillic, that's not completely different. It's different, but it's relatively similar. And it looks very foreign at first, but after a week of reading while listening or copying with handwriting, you don't even have to copy it. If you do a lot of um, repetition with the same sentences, reading while listening and then shadowing, you end up learning it quite quickly. Now, if it's something much more different, like Arabic, then you've got a problem there. And for that, my advice is not to learn it. If your goal is to understand and speak the language, learn to understand and speak the language first. Romanize everything and learn it like that. Learn it romanized, phonetically, using this alphabet, the Roman alphabet. If you really want to, or you really have to learn the script, like Hebrew, Arabic, or whatever, then scriptorium. So you take a text that you know what it means in small chunks, and you know the pronunciation as well. Like you know the meaning, and you know what it sounds like, and you copy it with pen and paper, and while saying them aloud, and then you do it again and again and again with the same text, and then once that becomes relatively easy, I mean, copying is not that hard, right? Then you try to translate from your language into the target language by hand with the target language alphabet or writing system, and that will be much more difficult. And then you take a red pen and you correct all your mistakes, and there'll be plenty of them. And the next time you'll make much fewer mistakes if you keep doing that. You'll keep making mistakes for a long time. Learning a completely different script and learning to read and write well, it's not easy. But that's the way I would do it. If it's, yeah, I mean, that's the way I would do it. You could use mnemonics maybe, but no, I think good old handwriting, first scriptorium, so copying while saying it aloud, and then translating into the target language without looking, and then checking the real translation or the machine translation and correcting your mistakes. That's the way I would do it. You could also hear sentences, and you could do this with your language islands, for example. You listen to a sentence without reading, you write it, and then you read it. Uh, you read the sentence in the target language, and then you compare and you correct your writing, and then you listen to another one, you compare, you correct your writing. Like you listen, you write what you listen to, you correct your writing. That's what I would do. But again, I'm not particularly interested in learning to write most languages. Okay, Wade Yule Teaching says, what's the best language to learn in 2026 in your opinion, and why? Uh, that's a question that doesn't really have a correct answer, because I mean, I guess English, but if English is already your native language, I wouldn't. I guess we're talking about other languages, not English, because everybody should try to learn English at this point. If you are like under 50, and you know you've got hopes in life, and yeah, learning English will be. You need to learn English, if you want to get somewhere in this day and age. But after that, really depends on your interests, your life goals. Again, what's the language to learn? It's really not the same for the guy moving to Latin America, because or the guy who is a Muslim and wants to learn Arabic because he's from, I don't know, somewhere I don't speak Arabic, but or someone who wants to move to Southeast Asia because he's really into Muay Thai, whatever, or someone who wants to move to Japan. It really depends on your life situation, your interests. There's no correct answer for this. But you should learn good at English first. You're probably a native speaker, but in general, I'm talking to people in general. Get good at English first. That's my advice, and then learn more languages. But whatever's interesting for you. Kevin Muller says, hey, Mikel, would you say your approach is the most efficient for comprehension too, or mostly for speaking? Because I feel like when writing down all the things I want to be able to say, those sentences usually aren't super long or complex. However, especially when reading books, this is constantly a very wide. There's constantly a very wide variety of patterns, vocabulary, idioms, nested sentences. And if it's fiction books, there is also a lot of dialogue. So we also see a lot of informal speech, abbreviations. Uh, and I don't mean physical books, but reading them on your PC. They're great tools so that. Okay, basically, for comprehension, speaking and comprehension are very different skills. They are related, of course, and the more vocab you know, the better you'll be at both, right? But and getting much better at speaking will help your comprehension, and getting much better at comprehension will somewhat help your speaking. But they're different skills. And if you want to work on your comprehension, mostly, what you need is first uh, learn more vocab, because without knowing the words you cannot understand, and also then practice understanding the kind of content you want to be able to understand. Um, so if you want to read books in the language, then you should read books in the language. Learn the most common words, and then just start reading books and write down all the words that you don't know, memorize them with associations, and keep reading. If you want to understand something else, like podcasts or YouTube videos, so that kind of stuff, and then it's also topic specific as well, right? But you should learn the vocab of the topics that you are interested in first, and the most common and the frequency lists, of course, the most common verbs and all of that, and then just get exposed to the language a lot while also learning a lot of vocab. If you are listening to podcasts um, that are like fast paced, people speaking, conversations, you need to get used to that. Especially, like, I get a lot of people who they know the vocab, and if they read the transcript, they understand what the conversation is about, but then they can't understand the conversation when listening to it, and that is because even if they know all the vocab, or 80 or 90% of the vocab, then it's too fast and too messy, and pronunciation is not clear, or like they don't enunciate it. Like, normal people speak fast, right, in informal conversation. So people then don't even if you know the vocab, you don't understand the podcast. And then what you need to do is just practice listening to that podcast until you understand it. Like, read the transcript, memorize the words if there are a lot of them that you don't know, and then listen to it. My advice is always to learn the vocab before you get exposed to the content. Don't watch a YouTube video and then like look up the words, because it'll take four times more time to watch the whole thing, because you'll have to stop all the time, and instead of a 15-minute video, you'll watch a 15-minute video in an hour, because you'll be stopping, looking at words. No, just take the transcript, either read it from start to finish quickly, or put it through a vocabulary calculator, and then you get a vocabulary list, and you look up all the words that you don't know, and then you watch the video right after looking up all the unknown words from the list. So you are, first of all, understanding a lot more when you're watching the video, because you just looked up all those words, so the vocab is much easier. And also, those words you looked up and hopefully associated with memorization techniques, then you're reviewing them right after by watching the video, and you're seeing those words in context. That's the best way to improve your comprehension. Learn the vocab, and basically practice. To understand better, you need to practice your ability to understand the exact same content or contexts. Like, if you want to understand people in real life, listen to people in real life. That kind of watch shows or listen to conversations of that kind of people speaking the same way. Because of course you can't look up words in real time in real conversations. I mean, you could, but it'd be weird. and not practical. So yeah, practice for to improve comprehension. Practice comprehension of that specific kind of content, and look up all the words beforehand. Um, Sam Gwen says, "What's the best strategy you use to apply the repetition? There's a lot of old and new sentences to review." Yeah, I get this question a lot. So basically, if you are adding, I don't know, 30, 50, 100 new words or sentences per day to your islands or to your list, the best way to review all of it is create audio files and listen to them during the day. If you just keep adding them to a playlist and listening to them, you'll listen to them at least once a day. 100 sentences, uh, 5 minutes of audio, less maybe, depends on the language and the text to speech software. But yeah, you can easily review over 1,000 sentences in an hour by listening to them. That's how you. That's the best way to get spaced repetition. You will not learn all of them perfectly in a few days, but if you keep listening to the same ones after 2 or 3 weeks, you'll remember almost all of them. Again, if you are consistent, because it's spaced repetition. That's why it's better to go for more sentences, like a bigger group of sentences, and review it regularly instead of focusing on really hard on a small group and then really hard on another small group and completely forgetting the first one. If you do it like that, like after a few weeks, you'll forget the stuff from the first week because you haven't seen it again. So yeah, lots of add more stuff to the list and then listen to it all together while you do other things. Listening is great for that, for repetition, reviewing. Okay, next one. When do you decide to move on from one island to another? I guess he meant island here. How do you know when you've had enough listening and repetition? It's never it's never really enough. You could always do more, but your time is limited. What criteria do you use to determine that something has become second nature in your mind? Okay, that last one is a deeper question. So first question: when do you decide to move on? Just add new stuff every day. You don't learn a group of sentences for days and days and days. No, you learn them. You do a few rounds with it today when it's new. Yeah, you go through the whole list from start to finish 5 or 10 times, maybe listening and reading at the same time, shadowing, and then tomorrow you listen to it. You do this with another group of another island, uh, but you listen to this one. You don't need to know it perfectly to move on to another one. Like I said in the previous question, it's not about learning something perfectly and then moving on to something else. No, you should learn a lot of them somewhat okay, and then the same group eventually pretty well, and then really well. It's not about learning something really well, like a really small group really well, and then another really small group really well, because that way you'll make progress really slowly. It's better to learn more quantity of sentences, um, more like seeing them more regularly, like doing space repetition with them. So you, yeah, basically add a new one at least every day, and the previous ones you listen to them or repeat, and you shadow them if you want. Also, the last question: what criteria do you use to determine that something has become second nature? I don't really know how to respond to that because, yeah, like there's no box to check there that okay, this has become second nature. No, you go from knowing nothing to knowing a little bit to then knowing a little bit more, and then you are somewhat conversational and you keep doing it, and you then can have basic like decent conversations and you keep going. It's unfortunately it's not like a video game or like a, you know, you get to the next level and then you get this many points. No, it's mostly vibes and gut feeling. You practice a lot, you do a lot of reps, and the more reps you do, the better you get. But there's no real like moment of, okay, I've mastered this language. I don't have to learn it ever again. No, you just keep practicing in different ways. Once you're able to understand native speaker content that's interesting relatively well, then you listen to that more and more, and you keep getting better by listening to interesting content. But you should still do speaking practice. Um, Ideally, speaking to native speakers, but also if you keep doing like the active recall and the shadowing and all of that, you will keep improving. There's no yeah, you don't get a certificate in real life. You just like you keep getting better the more you do it, and you start getting worse if you stop doing it. That's also a reality. Okay, fellow human says, what techniques would you recommend to people who did not care about speaking but only cared about understanding both written and spoken? Um, Essentially, the same kind of techniques apply, but less focus on things like shadowing and active recall. The active recall is helpful as well for comprehension. Like, there's no technique that's 100% for comprehension and nothing that's 100% for speaking. Um, but the active ones like shadowing and active recall are more tiresome. Like and active recall is also slower. So only for comprehension, I would do vocab, of course, first a lot, and then a lot of input with the kind of stuff you want to understand, and that's pretty much it. You know, you uh, there are things you can do that will improve your comprehension. Like if you do active recall, you learn certain words much better. So when you are reading or listening and you encounter those words, you will now be sure of what they mean instead of guessing. Because what a lot of what you do when learning with input only is guessing. Um, you if you'll understand the general gist of like what they're talking about, but you will not get a lot of specific words. And if you do an active recall, you will understand those specific words, and you'll understand the sentences much more precisely when you're listening or reading. But it's also much slower and much more uh, yeah, it's exhausting to do that active recall. So for comprehension alone, no, just repetitive exposure to the same content, same kind of content. If it's books you're interested in, memorize the vocab and then read the same book from start to finish several times. That's what I would do. If it's podcast, just watch the same episode or listen to the same episode after. Oh, always, like I said earlier, always after uh, memorizing the vocab. Like, do review the vocab list before you get exposed to the content, always, and then listen to it several times until you understand. Like the second time you understand something, it'll be much easier, way easier, and then the third time even it'll be boring as well the third time. But this is a good way to boost your comprehension. But then yeah, a lot of input. There's no other way of doing this. Learn the most common words and then keep learning more and more words. Learn the specific vocab of the content before you get exposed to the content, and then if you have the time and motivation for it, get exposed to the same content several times. Okay, very super cool guy. 123. It's a cool name. Says, should I be adding new language islands even if I haven't fully learned my current ones yet? Yes, because otherwise you'll never think you've mastered the current ones, so you'll keep reviewing the same ones over and over again, and yeah, you'll stay at that level forever. So you should always add new ones. Add new ones every day if you can. You don't need to know them perfectly. Add new ones, listen while reading, shadow them, do active recall, and the previous ones, just keep listening to them. You know, create a playlist and keep listening to the previous ones. If you've done a lot of repetition with the previous ones and you listen to them once a day or once every couple of days, you will not forget them. So you should be adding new ones all the time. Just do a lot of repetition, a lot of drilling with a lot of drills with the new ones, while like passively reviewing the older ones. Uh, Matbab says, "What are some signs that fluency is really starting to develop? I keep finding little moments where I understand things or say things perfectly, and it surprises me. Kind of like suddenly being able to bench press 20 more pounds than my last max test because I've been training other overlapping lifts. Since you've gone through the beginning to fluent pipeline so many times, have you noticed any patterns? There are things like that, yeah, but it's not a linear progress. It doesn't like go like that. It's more like like a I was gonna say like a cryptocurrency, but no, that means that at the end of it, your level just like completely crashes and burns. No, but yeah, it grows in it's got peaks and then lows, but each low is slightly higher than the low before the peak, so it's upwards. But that's your perception of your level. Your real level, there's no real way of knowing it, you know. Um, and it's your perception of it. And sometimes you feel great because you, for many different factors, you did great in that specific conversation because I don't know, you're motivated, you knew the subject, like the whatever. You just found the exact right words you needed to use, or you understood everything for whatever reason, and then the next day you feel like, oh, I'm actually getting worse because you weren't able to speak and you had a bad interaction. It's all very uh, your perception changes all the time. Like I said, it goes like so. The best thing you can do is just keep doing a lot of reps. Um, Fluency is starting to develop. Well, are you able to have conversations? Do you understand? That's it, basically. Just two more reps. Uh, Repeat more sentences aloud. Listen more. Listen while reading more, and eventually, like if you're able to shadow the audio files, your language islands, without struggling too much to say all the sentences in one go. Like at first, it'd be like, "What are some signs that, or like, what are some signs that fluency is really?" You think really slowly at first, but if you can, then what are some signs that fluency is really starting to develop? Like if you can, while reading and listening and saying, shadowing it, if you can go through the sentence at the same pace and you can say it in one go without struggling, then it means that okay, your mouth is getting used to it, and your brain as well. You now can process the language. But again, a lot of this is just gut feeling vibes. There's no way to effectively measure this. You just have to keep going. Fellow human again. Do you recommend the exact same techniques for a raw beginner versus someone who is more experienced with the language already? This is a question. This is a good question, and the answer is yes. The techniques are the same. You just do them at a higher level. Shadowing as a like beginner from zero is really helpful to learn the pronunciation of the language and start getting, uh, some reps, and you start saying sentences aloud. So you start developing some basic ability to say things. But if you're already at a C1 or even C2 level, shadowing will still be really useful to sound even more like a native speaker. Because you even at a C2 level, you don't sound like a native speaker. Most people, even and then some native speakers don't have a C2 level in the anyway. Yeah, those techniques really useful at both levels. For whoever's starting from like day one or someone who's at a C1, C2 level, at a different level, but equally as useful. Uh, you're still improving by doing that. Same applies to active recall. Yeah, as a complete beginner, you do active recall with "Hello, my name is this. I'm from this place. Nice to meet you." That kind of stuff. As a C1, C2 level learner, you do it with really advanced sentences or entire paragraphs, maybe, of advanced stuff. But the concept is the same. You try to produce language, you write something difficult in the language, and then you get corrected. It's exactly the same concept, right? So it works for both. And even mnemonics, because if you are at a higher level, well, if you're at a beginner level, you need to learn a lot of basic vocab, frequent vocab. Mnemonics will help you learn those fast. If you are at an advanced level, the vocabulary you need to learn is uh, much less frequent, but there are a lot of words that you need to learn, a lot of advanced words, and because they're not common, you would need a ridiculous amount of exposure to the language to see those words in context enough times to remember them. But if you instead use mnemonics, you will remember them much faster. So yeah, mnemonics useful for beginners and for uh, advanced learners. Same for shadowing, for pronunciation and fluency. Same for active recall, for error correction and fluency as well, to learn to think in the language better and faster. So yeah, basically the answer, that's the long answer, but yes, same techniques, just different level content. Ian Let's says example sentences showing how you use word families. How could you use that when using a frequency list of the top 1,000, 2,000 verbs? Um, Example sentences. How could you use them? Well, in the case of verbs, you just use AI, and once you've got the list, you create a sentence per conjugation of the verb, and also other words that are not conjugations but are related. So you get 10 or 20 sentences with a different, depends on the language, of course. English doesn't have that many, well, it doesn't have uh, that many conjugations, right? But if it's something like Spanish, then it's way more. But yeah, you create an example sentence for each one of those. Just you tell ChatGPT to do it, and you then learn that verb in all its forms as an example sentence each. Then the next verb in all its forms, an example sentence each, and so on. And that way you learn all the grammar quickly, and a lot of words as well, because the same verb in uh, 10 or 20 different forms, you learn that verb really well, because it's a lot of reps you get in slightly different forms, right? Okay, David Israel says, I want to learn Spanish, but I need to learn Hebrew. How do I balance learning the two languages with your method? Um, you learn both at the same time if you've got enough time. If you have a sentence list, your language islands ideally, but if you have, I don't know, sentence list with the most common verbs or anything like that as well, but ideally your language islands, you translate them into both languages and you learn the exact same sentences in both audio files in Spanish and in Hebrew. And of course, not at the same in the same session that you learn the word in Spanish and the sentence in Spanish and then in Hebrew. No, you if you've got an hour, you do half an hour of one and half an hour of the other one. But basically, the same sentences in both, and because they're the same in the same order, it'd be much easier to learn this way. Because once you've done your session of the day with one language and you start the second one, it will all sound familiar because you'll know what comes afterwards, like, because you know what sentence comes after each sentence, and it's also your own sentences. So yeah, language islands, lots of reading, listening, and shadowing with them, and then eventually active recall as well. But just divide your time between both of them, both languages, and that's it. New Pup says, is it possible to estimate the amount of time it would take to reach B1, B2, or another level given a certain amount of time studying per day? For example, is it realistic to get to B2 level in a year, studying 15 minutes a day, if that time was allocated properly to shadowing, language islands, active recall, and other exercises? Context. There's no context here. Like, which language are we talking about? How much do you already know? Which languages do you already speak? Again, you can do a lot with 15 minutes a day if you do the right kind of stuff. 15 minutes a day of deep work with really effective exercises will, and you will improve very fast in any language, but you have to do it consistently. And again, it really depends on the language, and it really depends on a lot of other things as well. Context is really important. But yeah, if you do those things in any language, you shouldn't worry too much about levels, unless you have to pass exams. I wouldn't worry too much about that, because the question here is, what do you want the language for? And if it's for something like, okay, I need to get a job in Germany and I need a B2 certificate, otherwise I can't get the job. Okay, then yeah, that makes sense. Or I want to go in Erasmus as a student and I need a this whatever certificate. Yeah, but if it's just like as a personal goal, I want to be able to speak the language, focus on comprehension and speaking. Like, don't, like, those levels. I know people with C1 certificates in English, Spanish people who can't really speak English, um, and people who were going to A2 level classes who were basically fluent with a bad accent and like yeah, they weren't great, but they were fluent. Like, they were able to talk about anything for a long time, all day. So it's really like those levels. I'm not a big fan of those levels, and you shouldn't really set arbitrary goals unless you really need to pass exams. But then that's another skill. Like, preparing for those exams, it's of course, getting better at the language will help a lot. But if the goal is to pass the exam for a specific thing you want to do because you need a certificate, then practice the specific uh, the specific parts of the exam and just practice those so that you get good at those or doing those specific things. Um, Milo May says, how do you reach near native fluency in a language? By near native fluency, I mean perfect pronunciation, intonation, and practically no grammatical errors. That's a lot of work. And in most cases, I would say it's not even worth it. How do you do it? You keep learning. You well, you need to do a lot of everything. Right? So, let's say you are already fluent in the language. Let's say you're at a B2 or even C1 level, in grammar and all of that. You okay, you can communicate effectively, you can have long conversations, any topic. How do you get to a near native level? Well, massive amounts of reading and listening, because you will need, and I'm talking about books and podcasts, and yeah, if you want to sound like a native speaker, there's no way around it. Like a native speaker, where they can't tell you're not a native speaker, you I guess you could achieve it, but it's you'd have to spend thousands of hours exposed to content. For this, yeah, it's absolutely necessary to do that. To get relatively good at a language fast, that's not the best way to do it. But once you're decent at the language, if you want to sound like a native speaker, yes, there's no way around it. You'd have to spend lots of time ex- exposing yourself to the language, but also just a lot of deliberate practice, massive amounts of listening and repeating, lots of feedback. You need constant correction. Active recall would help as well. Until again, do it with tens of thousands of sentences until you can translate them all into the language without mistakes. Do lots of writing. Again, needs to be corrected, so it's good. And for the accent, it's just massive amounts of practice and feedback. You need both repetition and feedback. And even then, like, this might take a long time. For 99.99% of people, this is not worth it, because with the time and energy this will take, um, you can get fluent in a couple more languages, or probably more, or you can do something else that's also like that also has a much bigger impact on your life. Like, once you get good enough, and I don't mean like speaking decent English. No, like, if you want to sound, once you get fluent and have a good accent, like, do you want to, like, are you a spy or something, or like, you want them to think you're a native speaker? And maybe if you live in the country and like, you want to integrate fully, yeah, then it makes sense to do this. But yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. In that case, that makes sense. Yeah, in that case, if you move to a country and you want to sound like not only like a local, but like sound educated and sound basically indistinguishable from locals, uh, and of course that's helpful if you want to have a career there. Then yeah, then this would be helpful. But for most language learners, I don't think it's a good use of your time. But again, like I said, massive exposure to the language, which you are probably already doing if you have these kind of goals, and then massive amounts of reading, while listening, while shadowing, listen and repeating, recall yourself, compare it, send it to a native speaker, have a native speaker correct your pronunciation over and over, active recall until you do it with thousands of mistakes and thousands of sentences, and until you do it with no mistakes at all. And yeah, that's basically it. And writing as well with feedback. But yeah, a lot of work. uh, Louis Bullinger says, Mikel, I'm currently learning Spanish. I'm at an intermediate conversational level and have learned using Castellano, European Spanish, to just make files. Since I will be going to Argentina for a couple of months, I will be living with host families. I'm wondering whether it is worth changing the audio files and shadowing the Argentinian accent and phonetics. I'm simply worried that I will end up mixing both accents after the trip. Is it possible to switch between them? It is. I can do it. um, Not gonna do it now. It is. If you create audio files for the same sentences and you switch to those and then switch back to Spain ones once you get back from there, yeah, you can learn to switch. Um, what you could do instead is to listen to Argentinian Spanish, to podcasts or radio, things like that, to get used to what they speak like and to get used to understanding what they say, and then continue doing your thing, your shadowing and your reps, like the speaking part in Spain Spanish. So you keep speaking Spain Spanish, but you train your ear to understand Argentinian Spanish. That's probably, if long term you don't want to keep an Argentinian accent, which sounds really cool, by the way. But if you want a Spain Spanish accent, then just listen to Argentinian and to get used to it and to understand it, and keep doing your shadowing with the Spanish from Spain audio files. All right. Joy says, "What are all the languages you can speak?" You can go to the homepage of the website of the YouTube channel, and you'll find a list there with the links. Very super cool guy. Is this the same guy as before? Yeah. With this method, how do I know how I am progressing? You don't. A2, C2. You could take online tests, maybe, but the reality of it is those level tests. I mean, this a lot of this is just how you feel about it. Like, what can you do with it? Are you able to have conversations? Do you feel good during those conversations? Um, if you want to measure progress, you could measure the hours spent doing active practice, like uh, the shadowing part, for example, and you can do active recall. And active recall doesn't lie. If you translate into the target language and then get feedback, and you keep doing it, you will see all the mistakes you're making. And if you keep doing it, you'll make fewer of them, and eventually you'll do it with very, very few mistakes. And it's true that I'm not a big fan of the A1, A2 stuff, but for the active recall part, the AI that I train does work with levels if you ask it to. So it'll give you A1 sentences, and once you translate them relatively well into the target language with very few mistakes, it'll give you A2 sentences, and you translate those. And if you do it like 80 or 90% correctly, it'll give you B1 sentences, and you keep doing it until, well, you're doing C1, C2 sentences, which it's not really worth doing because they're super long and complicated, and nobody talks like that in real life. But yeah, that's one way of doing it. But otherwise, you could take online tests as well if you want. But I'd focus on real skills, not like on paper skills, on paper like levels. IIRJW says, "What speech to text software do you use?" And I guess here, TTS Maker, yeah, or 11 Labs. But like I said in the first question, use TTS Maker. This quality of the voices is not as good as 11 Labs, but it's much easier to use, cheaper as well, I think, and yeah, you don't need to be an engineer to use it. You just like paste your text there, and you get audio files. With 11 Labs, it does tend to make mistakes. Javier Kratos, no se me ocurre nada de qué hablar. ¿Cómo tener ideas de qué hablar? Puedes escribir puedes usar ChatGPT para que te haga una lista de todas de situaciones y interacciones habituales que puedas tener en el idioma o temas que salgan habitualmente. Te pondrá una lista entera te dará una lista entera de temas y vas eligiendo los que te gusten. Y luego le dices también que te dé uh, frases de ejemplo para cada uno de esos temas y luego las usas. No usas directamente las frases que te da, sino que las usas para crear las tuyas propias. Y lo que puedes hacer también es tomar apuntes durante el día. O sea, igual te puedes mandar mensajes de voz a ti mismo o algo así, eso es lo que hago yo, sobre cosas que vas viendo, cosas de las que has hablado, eh, lo que vas a hacer luego, etcétera. Y luego, cuando estás delante del ordenador y no sabes, quieres escribir islas lingüísticas y no sabes de lo que hablar, pues tienes ahí un montón de ideas que se te han ido ocurriendo durante el día y las apuntas todas y las expandes con inteligencia artificial. Pero es cuestión de práctica. All right, next. Vblow MMA. Hello, I've tried to generate with ChatGPT. As you suggest, 1,000 sentence questions about B2 level. But ChatGPT gave me several questions, but with a lot of repetition, so not near from. Yeah, no, no, you shouldn't ask ChatGPT to give you 1,000 questions. It's good. The questions you're going to get with that are not good. If you want to get questions about a topic, first of all, specify the topic. So give some information about yourself. I'm Mikel. I'm from this place. I work doing this and that, and I like this, and this. Ask me a hundred questions. 1,000 is way too much. First of all, 100 questions about myself. After giving it a few lines of information, and then it will give you some decent questions. Not all of them will be good, but out of 100, maybe 50 or even 60, 70 will be good enough. And then you answer all of those, and then with that you've got a decent amount of content for your language islands. And then what you can do is expand on those. You take a specific topic. Okay, you're into MMA. I like doing MMA. I think I see MMA there. So I like training MMA. I train twice a week. Blah blah blah. You say you write 3 or 4 lines about it, and then you say, "Ask me 100 questions about it," and you get a lot of questions. Again, some of them won't be good, but most of them will be. But because you gave it context, and then you answer those, and you ask something else, or you give it some other context, and again tell it to give you 100 more questions, and that's how you can quickly generate a lot. And then Craig Cook here says, my advice for that is ask ChatGPT to generate 100 questions, then after that ask it to generate another 100 questions. Yeah, pretty much it. And the more input you give ChatGPT with your prompts, the better the outcome will be. For example, the first 100 questions, exactly, yeah, could be based on travel. So next month I'm going to Berlin for work, blah blah blah, which I am, by the way. And it will give you then it'll give me 100 questions about my trip to Berlin next month. Then the next 100 based on homework. Yeah, exactly. You give it some context. That's basically what I said. Yeah, this guy gets it. You give it some context and then 100 questions, and or even 20 questions. And then some more context about something else, and ask me questions about it. And this way you can create a lot of material quickly, and then you should learn both the answers and the questions, because those questions are also useful, a lot of them, to then first to understand people when they ask you, but also you want to be able to ask other people as well, right? And I think that's it. Yeah. Um, I'll. That was long already. I'll have another one of these soon, next Friday probably. And there's also another list of questions that I owe you guys still, because last time I didn't have the time to do it. So I'll try to answer those as well. But if you've got questions, just drop them here in the comments, and next week I'll have another one of these.